Good word. Thank you, Micah. So every year we have our annual congregational meeting, typically in June, prior to the beginning of the next program year, which starts July 1. And the two main orders of business are to approve our annual budget and our list of leaders for the coming year. I'll open up the meeting quickly to say thank you. Thank you to Doug Branson, our treasurer this past year, who led the budget process. Thank you to Abby Flowers, who led the nominating committee to present the list of proposed leaders for the coming year. And then as a brief segue, a thank you to Jeff and to Margie for spending time with our young people this past week. You heard about that, which it was wonderful to hear our young people in church. I've gotten to hear some stories over the last couple of days. Picked up 4 boys at 12:46 a.m. on Friday and heard some stories in the car all the way home. And as a father, it's thrilling to stay up late and to hear those stories, but it's also, as a member of the church, exciting to connect what we're doing here in this congregational meeting to that work, both the work of our leaders, both elected and those who have joined us on staff, but the work of money in the process. It is through gifts from the church, through our annual budgeting process, that allowed for a big trip like this to happen, and to happen at not a lot of out-of-pocket expense for the families who were sending their young people on that trip. And so it's wonderful to be able to connect those dots in terms of doing a congregational meeting, which shows up in our bylaws and is a thing that is a requirement for how we run the work of the church, but then to see and feel how it is experienced in the lives of the members of this congregation. So, first item on the agenda is the annual budget. That was sent out earlier this week. There were some physical copies here as well. There were 3 goals that Doug, as the treasurer, and the finance committee set out in doing the budget this year. Goal 1 was to create a budget that zeroes out revenue and expenses. So a few years ago, we changed our budgeting process to a zero-based budget approach, which meant that we weren't just filling in gaps year after year and doing the same thing we had done in previous years, but we were trying to look ahead and understand what it is that the coming year needs from a budgeting standpoint. Second goal was to accurately budget expense categories that have been over budget for the last few years. So we had the last couple of years, as we've gone through COVID, navigating some things where we kind of under budget. We kind of undershot what we thought it would cost and take, specifically related to our property and our utilities. And so one of the goals in this year's budget was to right-size that, was to make sure we were budgeting adequately for the needs of the church. And then thirdly, it was strongly suggested by a number of folks, both on the administrative council and then members of the congregation, that we institute targeted increases in our salaries and benefits for specific staff based on changes and increases in responsibilities that have occurred over the course of the last couple of years. And so those 3 goals are what drove the budget process this year. And as such, the Finance Committee's recommendation of a new budget to the Administrative Council was unanimously approved, and then that is brought to you here today. The recommendation by the Finance Committee is a motion to approve, and so I will then ask for a second from members of the congregation. Jim Carl's second. Any questions or discussion related to the budget that you have seen? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting this year's proposed budget, say aye or raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Budget passes. Thank you very much again to Doug and the Finance Committee. Second, the list of leaders. It is a task that sometimes feels very much like a task, but this year One of the things that I'm heartened by is there are new folks who are part of our leadership moving forward. And our leadership consists of folks on the administrative council, elders, deacons, folks who are elected by the congregation to help move the church forward. The nominating committee recommended a list of leaders, which you have and have seen, and that was recommended to the administrative council, which was also unanimously approved. I'm going to just briefly read to you those leaders. Some of those folks are here today, but I think it's helpful to hear it and not just know that it exists on paper. So those proposed in the coming year, the role of chair is Jim Carls, chair-elect Abby Flowers, secretary Laura Miller, treasurer Jeff Miller, members at large Jack Wallace and Julia Keith, chair of deacons Gail Sanders, new deacons Gia Dixon, Kathy Zamata, Nancy Kleinert, chair of property Cameron Kabusafar, chair of personnel Betsy Von Dolan, chair of nominating Pat Cole, chair of the board of trustees Jim Zamata, newly elected trustee Carol Doige, chair of elders Quentin Flowers, new elders Julia Calloway and Roger Young, stewardship chair Doug Branson, and worship chair Melissa Freeman. So taking the approved slate from the Administrative Council as a motion to approve, can I get a second from the congregation? Ed Cole, seconds. All those in favor of approving the list of leaders as presented this morning, say aye or raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Well, thank you. New leaders begin their term July 1st. The new fiscal year begins July 1st as well. I'm grateful to all of you for sticking around, being a part of this part of the church, for being a part of all the ways that you are a part of church. And that concludes this morning's congregational meeting. Have a wonderful Sunday. Thank you.